All right, everyone. We're ready for the final talk of today's LangNet Symposium. We have Miguel de Icaza from Novell talking about mono.
So, right? We're good. So the story of mono begins, and I think it's interesting so you understand why we did certain things, or why we decided not to implement certain things, or why we made all the mistakes that we made in the way of doing it. Is that we had been working on trying to fill in the gaps for Linux on the desktop, right? So Linux on the desktop was not as mature or as good as Linux on the server towards the end of 1999, and we started building a bunch of applications that we thought were missing on the desktop. And one of them is the email client that I still use today. It's called Volution. It's very similar to Outlook. And when we built this application, we actually went through a lot of pain. We created this application as part of a startup that we created in the year 2000, a friend of mine and myself. And we basically hired a bunch of people to work on this thing and a couple of other things in the Linux space. And it was very difficult to build. The application was multi-process. The application was multi-threaded. It was completely written in C, in part because we fundamentally oppose C++, and that's probably a mistake, and you could blame us for that. But we decided to keep the application completely written in C, and that was ugly. So by the time we finished the application, originally the application was supposed to be finished in 6 months, right? We said we can write an Outlook clone in 6 months. It actually took 2.5 years. So we miscalculated there, and we thought we could do it with 5 people, and it actually took 17 at the worst possible time. So we were finishing up the product, and we're getting ready to release, and we spent about the last 6 months running this application through a tool called Purify. These days in Linux we have something better called Valgrind, but back in the day there was no Valgrind, so we used Purify and Solaris, which was the only tool available really to track down leaks, memory overwrites, using buffers that we didn't really own, stuff that we had released but that somebody kept a pointer to. So all kinds of errors of that nature, and it was very painful because it was 6 months where we did really nothing but fixing these kinds of issues in a fairly large code base. I don't even remember how big it is, but it's a monster of an application. So we're coming out of that experience, and roughly around that time, Microsoft showed for the first time .NET and published the specs of C#, and we saw a language that we really liked. It did have a lot of things in common with Java, but it seems like they had added a couple of very nice improvements over it. I really never got myself into the Java mood because they didn't have enumerations, and it's silly, but that was why I didn't like Java. So Microsoft came up with this thing, and it was nice. It had enumeration, it had properties, it had this events thing, and so it resonated with us as we were building this application, and also as we were trying to build a language-independent framework for APIs on Unix. Right? We thought that with some of this experience that we didn't really want to continue building applications in a very low-level language. We wanted to use Perl or Python or Scheme or anything high-level to build the applications and keep all of the GUI libraries and the low-level stuff in C. So it resonated with us, the story that Microsoft was pitching about .NET, and also the language was fairly nice. So around that time, we decided to implement, to start an open source project to get the very basics, and only the very basics. If you read the original goals of the project, we really only wanted to get the ECMA core, the C# compiler, and bindings to our own libraries. That was pretty much the extent of it. And we kind of grew, and this thing ballooned as the time went by. So just to give you an idea of where we are today, and you have to understand that in the world where we operate, in the open source world, there's a lot of fear and hate involving Microsoft. So the implementation of a standard of this nature it's debatable, and it's a big flame war. It's a big flame fest. It's very nasty. The fights that go on for weeks, and they're nasty, and they're death threats, and they're seriously death threats. I've received a couple of them for implementing a Microsoft standard. Anyways, so there's a lot of fear and hate in some quarters of our computer science community. And so one of the things that we've done to kind of minimize a little bit of this thing is that in Mono we have a separation between the two universes of libraries, right? Mono implements two separate universes of libraries, and we've kept them isolated over time. One of them is the stack that you guys are familiar with, ASP.NET, ADO.NET, and Windows Forms. And we have an implementation of those, and they're useful if you're trying to bring your application from Windows to Linux. And then we've created a bunch of other APIs that respond to our own needs in our space. So bindings to the GNOME desktop, which is the desktop that we use, integration with Apache, bindings to script OpenOffice, so you can do the equivalent thing that you guys do with COM and Excel and so on, and a lot of other stuff. We've integrated IKVM into Mono, so you can run your Java applications. And curiously, there's a lot of people who do that. Mozilla. So you can control the XPCOM, and you can do JavaScript calls into an embedded Mozilla and so on. So anyways, there's a lot of work along that area, and that's kind of, and you'll see that we actually keep in mind this split everywhere. So when we're building tools, we build two kinds of tools: tools that benefit the Microsoft crowd, and tools that are exclusively aimed at the Linux users. For example, we have an IDE, a developer IDE called MonoDevelop, and it's completely built on this stack, and it's designed to pretty much develop applications for this stack. It has no support for Windows Forms, and it only has some prototypical support for ASP.NET. It's not really our intention to move it in that direction. So we want to kind of improve what we can do with our own stack. Just so you get an idea of what we're doing, our virtual machine, so as I said, it's an implementation of the virtual machine, the ECMA 3.3.5. We have a couple of ports in a bunch of architectures, so 32-bit, 64-bit machines, a bunch of operating systems. What is interesting is that if you write your code correctly, or anytime you use objects or pointers, they all become 64-bit when you run a 64-bit machine. What else? We have the equivalent of NGen. We call it AOT. We call it ahead of time compilation. What we did is we based our AOT format on the L file format, so it's actually position independent code. I get the feeling that the Microsoft version has some limitations on when it can be used. I don't know what those are. But in our particular case, we generate code that will work across multiple app domains. So it's slower code, and actually on x86, it even hurts you to use AOT code instead of not using it. So in particular, in x86-64 is the only platform where you actually can take advantage of this and get good performance out of it. So this shows my graphical skills using some Mac software that I used a few years ago. So you get the idea. You know this stuff. I'll talk quickly about the licensing, and then I'll show you what is the space that Mono implements. Our intention with these licenses was designed to maximize the adoption of Mono in a highly debated environment. As I said, in the open source world, not everybody likes Mono. So our compilers they're all GPL. We don't really care too much about the compilers, and we might relicense them if there's a good reason to do it. But traditionally they've been GPL. Our class libraries are under a much more liberal license. They're under the MIT X11 license, which pretty much is do whatever you want with this code. The only thing you cannot do is sue us if the code breaks or destroys your data. I think that's the term. And the runtime engine is under the LGPL terms, and that's actually an engine that, and that means that we've actually been able to relicense the engine. I'll explain that in a second. Well, it goes compound with this thing. Every time somebody contributes code to either the GPL portions or the LGPL portions, Novell requires a copyright assignment on the code, which means that Novell has the rights to relicense the code under different terms. And it turns out that certain people are just too allergic to the GPL or the LGPL, which is much laxer in any form. So, so we're able to give them a license, and they pay us. So typically these are the embedded system people, because the GPL raises all kinds of issues in embedded systems. But But other than that, people have taken the compilers, they forked it. There was a fork this week presented. There's about 10 forks of the C# compiler today. People have gone and experimented with things. Our class libraries are typically used outside of the monospace by guys using the compact framework, because the compact framework, the guys who designed the compact framework basically chose a subset that was probably a fine subset for certain kind of applications, but didn't include many things that that people want. So a lot of people basically go and cut and paste code from our library. So many of the contributions that we get back are fixes from people who cut and pasted for their compact framework application. This is an artist rendering of the API space this year, roughly, and includes .NET 3.0, .NET 2.0, .NET 1.1. And this is roughly an idea of what you guys have been using for the past couple of years. And I'll show how that maps to Mono. Mono, our first release, which we call T-Bone. Actually, I just came up with the code names today because I was listening to people talk about Orcas time frame. So I figured it would be really funny to talk about the T-Bone time frame and the sirloin time frame. So I just gave them those names today. And I would appreciate if you guys would refer to Mono releases with that. So the first release of T-Bone shipped with a very slow version of ASP.NET. We were able to do 7 pages per second, which was very good, considering it was a 1.0. But we also shipped with a toolkit, GTK#, which became the foundation for all of the GUI applications that we've been building recently for Linux. There was no WinForms implementation. Of course, this didn't even exist. Oh, it actually did exist. We just didn't have any support for it. The next release we call Rumpsteak. And this is the one that we're working on right now. And the major feature that we added here, ignore this piece right now, but the major feature that we added was Windows Forms. And we thought it was going to be a 6-month hack again, and it turned out to be a 2-year hack. So we're again late, and I'm still planning the releases myself. So nobody in the company has found out about that. Anyways, so the next release basically comes with a number. I mean, this thing, instead of doing 7 releases per second, now does something like 250 requests per second. So the performance went way up. GTK# is updated to the latest bindings in the GNOME platform, which you guys probably don't care about. And Windows Forms implement the 1.1 API. That's all we do in this release. And Kira had mixed emotions about how to color these boxes, but this release has an implementation of C# 2.0 and generics in the virtual machine. And it has kind of a mixed, and I'll go into that, a mixed support for 2.0 stuff. So we're not 2.0, we're 1.1 plus. We're not really 2.0. We have 1.1 stuff plus 2.0 features. But you can start using generics. We're aware that there's certain bugs, in particular F#. Every time somebody runs something with F#, they find the bug in the generic support. I believe as of Friday last week, we don't have any pending open bugs, but that will change any minute now. What else? So anyways, our next release, which we call Sirloin, right, contains a number of upgrades to the stack, and we actually have an implementation of Indigo, which was able to send its first message last week. So it's not very big, it's not very useful, but it's coming along. And so that's roughly where we're standing today. I'll go into a little bit more detail. So what happened with our Mono 1.2 release is that what we wanted to do was just ship Windows Forms in the debugger and upgrade GTK#, which seemed like very simple stuff to do. And it turned out to be very, very hard. So instead, what we're going to ship is this. We're still waiting for the Windows Forms guys to finish. Windows Forms we consider it feature complete, but there's still many bugs. So the only reason we haven't released it is because there are enough bugs, rendering bugs, glitches, crashers, a couple of things like that, which are fairly annoying. So we're just waiting on fixing those bugs. In the meantime, as we waited, as I mentioned, we got generics, we get C# 2.0, and we believe it's complete, and the runtime support, at least the core lib support system and system XML are complete to the extent of our knowledge. And again, there might be bugs there. the way that we develop Mono, we're very much driven by applications that require these features. So for example, when Ruby.NET came out, we tried to run it and we were missing like, I don't know, 20 classes. And they were fairly simple classes, but we were missing them. So we had to go and patch those things. So as of a couple of days ago, we can actually run Ruby.NET and all the tests pass except a couple of ones because, anyways, doesn't matter. Because you guys invoke it with command.exe and command.exe doesn't exist. Anyways, doesn't matter. We get a debugger, Windows Forms, and we upgrade our GTK Sharp. Now, Mono 2.0 is actually not that far away because not everybody could really be working on Windows Forms. So while the guys doing Windows Forms are stuck doing Windows Forms, the JIT guys went on and did other stuff. The ASP.NET guys went and did other stuff. So today they're roughly at 70%. So provided you don't need anything on the 30% missing, you can actually use Mono as a 2.0 stack without certain things. So no web parts, which nobody uses. And ADO.NET, I don't even know what's in ADO.NET, so I don't even know. That's what my guys tell me. I have no idea what ADO.NET does. This week I learned about D-Link, and it's fascinating, but I really never used ADO.NET. The one time I actually built an application, it had an SQL injection bug. Some guy found it and sent me a patch, and I fixed it a month ago. So I really do not know anything about SQL. And that code was basically cut and pasted from some wiki. Anyways, there's a couple of things that we're adding which are interesting. We have this thing we call it an assembly linker, which was previously called Mono Diet. And what it allows you to do is basically say, well, I would like to run, it has multiple modes of operations, but imagine that you want to run hello world, right? So I say, well, I want to run hello world with the minimal set of dependencies, right? So it would generate hello world, and it would pull in turn system.console. And when it looks at system.console, well, to run WriteLine, you actually need to have StreamWriter. So it will pull also StreamWriter, right? And it would generate a minimal version of MS Core Lib. So it doesn't actually pull everything into a single assembly. It actually generates new versions of MS Core Lib, System XML, etc. Everything that you might depend on. And we're doing it because there's a lot of demand for that thing. All of our embedded users basically do not want a single profile that has everything that they probably don't use. So they want to run just a tiny little piece of software and anything that depends on it. And you can augment how exactly you do this. Basically, it's like a garbage collector, right? You trace all the roots and then you collect that into, and you basically sweep those guys and put everything that you need into a separate assembly. So there's a number of ways how you can control that and basically add more roots to these sets. So you can say, well, I need these classes and these members and these fields in addition to whatever you're packing. Another new feature, it's finished again, and we're not advertising it as running in Mono 1.2, although it's shipping in our distribution. It's a compacting GC. It took us about a year and a half to write that beast. It's done, it works, but compacting GCs are very scary animals, so we don't actually want to encourage anyone to use this until we feel that it's gone through enough testing. And so far it hasn't gone through any testing. We'll probably enable it after we ship 1.2. And we're going to push for our IDE to be complete. The goal there is for Mono Develop to be able to host itself, so the IDE should be able to edit itself and compile itself and run its own unit tests and so on. And there's an ASP.NET GUI designer that Google funded through the Summer of Code, and we hope to have that in there. So I want to show you, I want to take the rest of the talk, I want to show you a couple of things that we've done. Let me see if that's what I had in mind. Yes. So this is a release of our desktop, of our new desktop, and this desktop contains a lot of .NET code. The system updater, the system that actually installs packages and installs security fixes and upgrades them, allows remote management and all that stuff, which you can't really see because it's infrastructure running on the background. That's written in Mono. Our new media player is written completely in Mono. We had to rewrite it because you guys probably don't want to know, but if you want to know, I can explain to you. It's a very long explanation involving licensing patents. But so we basically had to write a new media player that would allow us to legally play MP3 files. And one of the interesting things that we did with the media player is that a lot of the functionality is actually implemented as plugins. So these are just DLLs that people write. They're not in the core of the application. And we can talk about the usability of that, but which I think is horrible. But a lot of the features that we have there, like for example, music sharing, exposes all of the music through DAAP, right? So if you have Macintosh computers running on the network, you should be able to see my music. The metadata searcher basically goes and finds cover art for your stuff and can find lyric stuff. What else? A plugin that just does podcasting, so you can subscribe to your podcast and listen to podcasts and so on. It does CD burning, as you would expect, smart lists, I don't know, bunch of other stuff. It synchronizes with your iPod. It actually, unlike most software that synchronizes with iPod, it lets you synchronize in both directions. So you can actually copy stuff to the iPod, and if a friend of yours comes by the house and has some interesting tunes that you might want to listen on your stereo, you can copy those into your machine, and it will work. So it's a great tool for sharing stuff. In a very open source way. And no, I'm not endorsing pirating or anything like that. Yes?
I just have to ask, your MP3 decoding, is that done in managed code?
No, the MP3 decoding we're using Helix decoder. And that's part of where the patent discussion comes in. The problem was that it's a very complicated story involving patents and contracts and agreements between companies that had early access to the contracts and those who don't. So for us to play this legally, we need to use a third-party MP3 decoder. Now, that being said, I wouldn't write an MP3 decoder in managed code and run it on Mono, because our performance is not as good as the .NET one. Now we're fixing it, and we can talk about performance, and I have a bunch of backup slides on what we're doing about performance. And I think we can match the CLR in performance, but it's going to take some time. Anyways, I wouldn't write a fast Fourier transform system in Mono today. I mean, you can, of course, but I wouldn't. What else? So this little thing is what is interesting too is that this was written in the last 9 months by a single developer, right? So this is our new media player. It's one developer, and it really shows that we were able to leverage a bunch of .NET libraries out there for this application. So the iPod synchronization was done by someone else who were just able to plug those libraries and do all of the iPod synchronization. It also does the other standard, whatever is Creative uses. I don't know what it is, but it also synchronizes with that stuff. I've never seen one of those devices live, so anyways. The other application that we built was it's this other one, our photo system. This was not actually something that we actually needed for a Linux distribution, but both Nat and myself have huge collections of pictures at home. So we actually, since we're both VPs, we could just assign someone to write some software for us. So, so we had another guy, actually the guy who drew the Linux Penguin, Larry Ewing, went and completed this application. And basically the goal for this application was, we have 60,000 pictures at home and we want to be able to browse them quickly. Now, this laptop has a piece of crap hard drive, so I only have a few hundred pictures here. But at home I have the last 5 years in pictures, and it's roughly 50,000 pictures. It's a lot of pictures. And you can pretty much scroll to any position and it will just update smoothly and nicely. It updates like that. The image rendering is actually not done in managed code. There's a library that is doing the rendering in C. So all of the intensive stuff is done in C. But still, the scrolling and all the async stuff is pretty good, right? You can scroll pretty fast in these things, and considering that everything is going through managed code, it's not bad. Oh, we don't want that. Hold on. Anyways, too many ugly people. And what we needed to do also was we asked them to do this tag system, so I could say, well, I want to see all the pictures that have Laura, and let me see if there's something else with another tag. I haven't tagged these pictures, but I could say, well, all of these are also Mexico, right? So whenever I'm looking for Mexico pictures, I get all the Mexican pictures, right? So here I don't have all the tags. I have them at home. One of the interesting things that we do is we actually write the tags into the file, so the tags get transported across your thing. So all the tags that I put here, as soon as I copy my files at home, I'm going to get the tags at home. And I can also get the comments there. And again, was pretty nifty because this application has also been put together in a relatively short time frame. This has been underdeveloped for longer, for a little bit more than a year. And it does this usual stuff. You can export this to a directory. You can export this to Flickr. You can put it in a CD. We'll burn the CD for you. You can spam your friends with 2 megabyte pictures. And as of last week, a friend of mine wrote Google Sharp. You can download the stuff from our CVS server, and it can actually export to Picasa, which has more space than the free account at Flickr. So anyways, the other thing that we're actually very excited is let me show you this in another window. So the other thing that we're pretty excited about is the search functionality. We built the equivalent of the desktop MSN search or the Google desktop search or Apple's Spotlight. And in fact, we actually built this functionality before all of those came out. And in fact, we beat Apple to the announcement by 6 hours. The difference is that we announced it at the GNOME conference, which had 200 people in some village in Norway. And 6 hours later, or 9 hours later, Steve Jobs was announcing it to 5,000 people at the Moscone Center. So they got an upper hand on the press. But we still got it first. We developed it in the open. Everybody could check it out every day. And it's very similar to what you've seen in the past. What we did is we did integrate into this panel. So search is available everywhere. And you probably saw the search available in the other things. But is that all there is for monobugs? Oh, no, there they are. There's a lot of monobugs. It uses Lucene for the indexing. And the way that we handle every one of the different file formats, like for example, this is indexing my IM conversations. That is indexing my notes, little notes that I have. And this is just comments that I read on IRC. So I can keep up with what people are saying. Each one of these things is basically a plugin, and every one of the plugins is basically just a little DLL. So you write a filter, so if you want to process Word documents, if you want to index Excel spreadsheet, if you want to index anything, you basically write a little chunk of C# code, and we'll hook it up into the system. So we do have managed libraries for reading Word documents and Excel documents. So if you're looking for some code to read all of that stuff, you can just copy paste the stuff that we wrote for this. And as I said, these are my notes that I keep for IM conversations. So whenever I ask a question and I don't remember it, like somebody says, so I keep this little note here. Anyways, and again, I can find there's this Bugzilla email, so it's not very interesting. Pages that I've visited, right? That contains mentions to Monron bugs, right? A link weblog, and you get a little screenshot down there. And all of this stuff was everything that you see here is built with Mono. And as I said, the rest of the desktop, we've been putting a lot of stuff to work on Mono, and we think we're much more productive than everyone else. Now, with that commercial finished, and the other thing is that it actually doesn't consume that much memory. In fact, Mono applications with GTK Sharp on startup consume roughly 4 megabytes of memory compared to the C equivalent, which consumes 2 megabytes of memory. If you compare this with Python and GNOME, Python is much larger memory-wise running GNOME applications than it's Mono running GNOME applications. So there's a lot of discussion right now in the community about how Python might be lighter than this stuff, and actually in every benchmark, our applications are smaller. So it's actually not that bad. And I did like a quote. Was it Jim that said it a couple of days ago? Somebody said, a lot of people blame the framework when they should really be blaming the application, right? A lot of the software that we ship, in particular the search engine, could still use a lot of optimization. I don't think it's Mono's fault. The application is a little bit of a pig. It's been tuned, but it could be much better, in particular when it's indexing email. Was it you, Jim? Yeah? Yeah, so a lot of people tend to blame Mono for their crappy code, and the reality is that they should be blaming their crappy code. Now, when it comes to UI strategies, where's that? Yeah. So let me talk about the GUI toolkits and what's the situation today. So everything that we build ourselves for the desktop, we build with GTK Sharp. And I'll show you why in a second. It is well integrated with our it's integrated with our desktops the same way that Windows Forms is it's an object-oriented wrapper around Win32. GTK Sharp is an object-oriented wrapper around our own libraries, everything that you saw on the desktop right now. It has a couple of interesting features, since all of the software we built is actually open source, and we get a lot of members from all over the world using these applications. People tend to translate these applications. So when you run these apps, we usually have translations for a multitude of languages. And we cannot really design interfaces the way you do it in Windows, where at least with Windows Forms 1.1, where you actually had to say, well, this is the size of the label, right? And if you change the label string, well, you have to resize the label or the text goes off the screen. Windows Forms 2.0 has a little bit of an improvement, but it's still pretty primitive. So the GTK Sharp model is very similar to the web, like the way you would do a table. You put a table and then the system figures out how to actually render it to fit the stuff on the screen. And also the other thing that it does support is languages that support right to left rendering. Right, so whenever you're running an application in an environment that does left to right rendering, let me show you that. It will actually swap the application. So for example, let me see what would be a good. I'm going to run this from the command line tool because I'm going to simulate the login and logout so you can get an idea. So this is a calculator. This is probably not the best example. But I'm going to simulate that this is running in a different language. This is a very bad example, actually, because it doesn't do very much. Like the translation is not very useful. But if you run it, or French from France, right? Let me try now. Ignore those warnings. What is Hebrew? It's Hebrew Israel? Or ESMX? Yeah, I think that's Hebrew. Well, the text is not translated for the calculator, but you'll see that actually all the numbers are swapped. So the runtime does swap it. Let me see if that actually works in Arabic. What is Arabic? It's Arabic Lebanon, maybe? Yeah, so as you can see, not everything is translated. I don't have everything translated in my system. But again, the buttons in the Israeli and Arabic case get swapped out. As you can see there. Oops, hold on. So this is done automatically by the GTK Sharp system. Let me see if I can find something more useful. Maybe there's a property somewhere here. No. What would have a property? Oh, maybe the editor. Gedit. We need a dialog box. Edit preferences. Yeah, that looks like it. All right, let's run the editor. So let's try the Arabic version of this guy. Oh, damn it. This thing identifies that the editor is running and refuses to run a new copy of the editor. So what are we going to do here? Oh, but that's going to suck. Anyways, okay, everybody, what you have to do, oops, sorry about that. So what you have to do is remember the contents of the screen. So just roughly remember that. Got it? Yep. All right. Let's hope we can find a good translation. Oh, we need to kill it first.
Oh, I forgot.
All right. All right. So what you can see here is now the menus are on the other direction, right? And that's all taken care of by the framework. And now the problem is going to be to find preferences.
Over 2, over 3, over 2 more.
This one?
No, keep going to the right. The other way.
Oh, this one?
One more.
No, this is edit.
There's preferences right there. That's the preferences.
Oh, of course! Al preferencia. All right. All right, so as you can see, not everything is translated, but what? What?
That way. That's the one I remember.
Yeah, but tab width is the one that is not translated. So that is just fascinating. Anyways, I wish I could show you because the dialog actually changes in size. And I guess that's close. I guess that's quit.
Can you make the font bigger?
Can I make the font bigger? I can. I have to change the DP. I mean, yeah, I can.
On a single app?
The what?
On a single app?
Oh, of a single app? No, no. That goes against our religious belief that everything on the system should be consistent. But I can change it here if you want, and then everything stinks. What? Why? Why would I have to reboot? Anyways, let me go here to quit, and let me get this back to you. You guys can really, you can't read? I mean, I'll switch it back, but it kind of annoys me. Anyways. So, I was going to tell you something about GTK Sharp. Oh, yes, GTK Sharp. Oh, yeah. So let me just give you a quick idea of how this thing... I shouldn't be using the command line because we're trying to de-scare people of Linux. But I've been using Linux... What? All right. So just to give you an idea, the way that you design these applications is... the way you design these applications, blah. And like Visual Studio, this is also kind of a pig. Hold on. Main window. So the way you design your applications is, whoa, I'm going to need a lot of space here. This is not going to be good. All right, so the way you build your applications is you basically use these containers, right? So you have a number of containers. The important ones are horizontal boxes. Which other one is important? Tables, right, which behaves very much like an HTML table. Vertical boxes, right? So for example, oh, that's a very bad idea. Let me delete this guy. Delete this guy, and let me put first one of these boxes so we can put some menus there. Let me put a table there. A menu bar there, so your usual file, edit. Open. Oh, we have something interesting. You know, a lot of the actions that are standard, we actually have this thing called stock icons or stock actions, right? So OK, close, back, forward, and so on. So for example, if I wanted to add a save button, I would just do that, and it adds a little icon for us. If I want to add a save as, which is not very different, I would do that. If I wanted to add a quit, what would be quit? It's a little door. There it is. And here you can do, I don't know, cut. There's a stock action for that too. Then we want to add a toolbar. Where's the toolbar? There we go. And now I can share the action. So every action I actually define, the toolbar and the menus share that information. So I can put, so all of these actions actually use the same stuff. I can change tool properties so it's not as ugly as it is right now. Oh, that's not what I want. I want small toolbar. Oh, no, this is what I want. Anyways, icon size, large toolbar. Okay. So, as I was saying, what you're basically sticking here is you put your labels, right? And these are not going to be translated because obviously this application has not been translated. But the idea here, let me show you, for example, something we're going to do here. And I'm going to delete this column. So if I run this application, oh, I need to remove the other column. Hold on. Let me remove this guy. Table, delete column. All right. So when I run this application, no, that is not good. Hold on. Oh, here it is. Okay, so there's a couple of properties here. For example, when I run this application, you will notice that the button fills as much space as the entry above, and that's because it's filling all of the available space on that particular thing. So what I do is I'm going to take that out, and instead the button is just going to take as much space as it actually requires, right? If the button were to need more space, it would actually resize automatically. So for example, I have to warn you, I never use 1024 by 768. So this is horrible for me. So if I were to create a label that was much larger, right, it would actually automatically expand the size of the dialog. So what happens here is that when we're translating these applications, we define everything in terms of these tables, these boxes, and these H boxes. And when the software runs in a different language, looks up the strings, sticks it in there, and the layout of the widget gets automatically resized. So it's very much like building a web application. Anyways, I'll stop boring you with that. So here we go. Now, the other toolkits that we have, Windows Forms today is almost there. It's almost there, as I said. The only thing that we are coping with right now is a bunch of bugs. It crashes in a couple of places. We have a couple of regressions here and there. It refreshes more than it should. So we're going through those ones and fixing some of that stuff. And again, we're holding on the release to that. Finally, for OS X users, what has happened, there's this other binding called Cocoa Sharp, and Cocoa Sharp is basically a .NET binding that will give you access to the Cocoa API. So you can get native OS X applications running on your Mac OS X. What we did at Novell, there was a product at Novell called iFolder, and what we did with iFolder is basically we had a core of the iFolder product that was a GUI-less DLL, right? So we had a GUI-less assembly that implemented all the functionality for iFolder, and we actually could afford this. Not everybody can, but we actually could afford this. So we actually built three UIs. We built the GTK Sharp UI, right? We built an OS X UI, and we finally built a WinForms UI. So the application is actually native on each one of these platforms. We don't have a toolkit that will magically give you nativeness all across the board. And part of that is that although a lot of people have tried to do one API that will give you nativeness across the board, the situation is that even if you get the menus to look like menus on each platform and the buttons to look the same and everything to look the same, the reality is that property editors on Windows have one particular way of working. The GNOME ones have another particular way of working, and the OS X ones are completely different. Or for example, OS X has these side panels that you can stick information to, and they hide when you don't need it. So if you can actually afford the time and the resources to do more than one UI, you might as well do more than one UI. Sadly, there's no good solution. I mean, we cannot give you one API that will be beautiful everywhere. Windows Forms applications on Linux still look a little bit odd. GTK on OS X also looks a little bit odd. There's a little of help coming our way because the way it works is basically you have GTK Sharp here, which is a binding, right, basically that merely p-invokes into a library called libgtk, right? And this is the thing that actually implements a whole UI on Linux. Now, you can actually run this guy on OS X, right? Because what libgtk does today is it has a driver, the X11 driver, and this actually talks to your X server, right? So those of you running a Mac, if you run a GTK Sharp application, it will run, but it will run through the X server. So you have to run X inside your Mac to do it. Now, that's not an issue for Jim because he's using OpenOffice inside X. So he's got that sorted out, but it's not the same experience. You don't get the macOS experience. One of the things that are being done, not by our team, but by another team, is that somebody's writing a different driver for this guy that actually uses Cocoa. So when you're running on macOS, your application, instead of using X11, it will use Cocoa. Now, it's using Cocoa at the wrong level, which means that it's doing all the drawing itself. It's using Cocoa to draw, and it's using some of the theme functions, but a lot of the feel of the toolkit, like what happens when you press Control something, is still hard-coded into libgtk. So although you can get some of the UI benefits and it would look more like a Cocoa application in the future, you still probably want to have a UI that is tuned to your operating systems. Anyways, so that's the story. It's not as bad as it seems, and I already showed you this. Now, let me show you a couple of Windows Forms applications, just so you get a feeling of this thing. And again, I should have something else, but whoops. So for example, what happened here? Oh. So this is a Lutz rotor reflector running on Mono. And Here you can look at my compiler source code without looking at the source. Anonymous container, for example, create deepest. It's a horrible method. I do not recommend that you write this code at home. In fact, it's the part that I'm most embarrassed in the Mono C# compiler. It's one ugly piece of code. Yeah, I have a too large window. Anyways. So this is Lutz reflector. Now, the reason Lutz reflector runs on Mono, this is kind of a trick thing, is that he actually, Lutz reflector, as run on Windows, actually uses IE for this side of the, how do you call that, the window. And what he did is he actually, well, and there you have it, a Windows Forms bug in action. So that's why we haven't released it. So let me see, what do we got here? So these are all of our Mono namespaces. So the reason why this works, oh, this bug is horrible. I'm clicking here and it's open, oh, no. Anyways, so what happened is that Lutz was actually kind enough to replace this thing that was using IE, and he's using RTF. I don't know why he did that, but we're taking advantage of the fact that we don't have IE support in Linux. So that's actually rendering with the RTF widget. My understanding is that it's missing some features. I don't know what those are, but that gives you an impression of where our Windows Form support is. And as I said, the bugs are, well, there's still a lot of bugs, like that one. Now, the other day I was writing a document about what does it take to write, what does it take to port an application from Windows to Linux, and I was trying to come up with examples. So we have all of the, we basically one day came out and looked at all kinds of software that we could get our hands on in the net. This is a very slow application. We tried to get as much software as we could get our hands on the net for Windows Forms, and we used that kind of as a test. Is this coming up? All right, that's why we haven't released this guy. So we came up, so we extracted everything we could get from Code Project, SourceForge, and a bunch of other sites. So we got all of the samples, we make them run on Linux. Most of the time it's just a makefile change. And I was basically trying to come up with a list of things that people should look out for, other than the obvious. Make sure that your path names, because Linux has different path semantics than Windows. It's case sensitive and Windows is not. Backslash is actually a valid file character for a file name. So if you hardcode backslashes, your application tends to break in strange ways. So I was trying to find some samples of what other things people should watch out for when porting applications. And I actually couldn't find anything that wasn't file name related in any of these applications. And we have this available in our CVS repositories if anyone wants to take a look at that. You know what? Something is burning my CPU and that's why everything is low. Hold on. Let me kill whoever is doing that. I mean, not even the top command is working. Anyways.
It's a calendar.
Oh yes, it's a calendar. 60, it's this guy. All right, there we go. My machine is back. I think my machine is back. Whoa, the load. Oh, now there's another one. Let me kill this other guy. All right, that looks better. So when it came to porting the applications, we didn't really find anything bad. Oh, the only one case where we actually found some problems was the larger applications. Paint.net, for example. Paint.net uses, I have a port of Paint.net here. Where's my window? Okay. All right. Paint.net is a fairly complete Windows Forms application. And that one does run into a number of issues. The first one is that Paint.net, the version that we have ported is the 1.1 version. So what happened with 1.1 is that they decided that the widget tree in Windows Forms was too ugly. So they used a third-party control library called I forget what it was called. Sky widgets. something like, oh, all right. So anyways, we did a fairly quick port of that thing, so I had to chop out all of the widgetry that these guys use because those widgets do a lot of pinvokes that we cannot run on Linux. So if your software uses pinvoke, it will not run. Yes? Oh. So I actually replaced all of that widgetry with Windows Form standard controls. Not everything is working, so this is a port that we did. And I don't know if this can be considered a sample of porting because I basically chopped left and right stuff until I got this running. So it's not the best example, and you can see all of those are messages that I put in my thing, so I remember that I have to fix them. So for example, this horrible palette there is horrible because I'm using the standard, whatever thing it is that one uses there instead of the nice one. And the same thing happens with a bunch of all those controls on the top. The toolbar is, instead of using this nice toolbar, I'm using the default toolbar that doesn't have all the features. So those buttons don't actually work. They're not even hooked up. But you can do some painting in this thing, and you can choose I don't know, a different color. And what else can you do here? These are implemented. So let me see. Like where's this guy? No, that's not it. Oh, this guy. So anyways, so this is not the best port we could have done. We did it so we had a test case that we could use and check out what was wrong. The new version of Paint.net actually has less external dependencies. They still have a few pinvokes, like for example, detecting whether you're connected with terminal services. So they actually remove a couple of features from the screen. Or some effects if you're using remote services, whatever that thing is called. So we still have to remove some of that. But at least it has much less pinvokes and much less dependencies on external stuff. They still have a share of them, like determining how many CPUs are on the system. Yes or no? Doesn't matter. So there's still a few things that we have to remove, but porting the application is not terribly complex. So anyways, I should go back to this thing. Is there anything else I should talk about? Our GUI toolkit strategy. Yeah, I think that's it. And now we have less than 10 minutes for questions. I have a lot of backup slides if you have crazy questions. I just figured I would not bore you with some technical, horrible JIT explanation. Yes?
I'm glad to see Mono in existence because it gives us more options for our platform, but I'm wondering what is Novell's business case for paying for the development?
Well, I have a slide just for that.
I was going to ask that too.
Yeah, I have loose ends, as you can see. Where did I put that? Oh, which one is that slide?
There was a Mono and Novell slide.
Oh, this one. So, so today, most of our effort is going towards our own platform, sustain our own developer platform, so GTK Sharp, these tools, and so on and so forth, and the Windows Form story that I just showed you. But Mono, as every open source project, is not actually run entirely by us. We do devote resources. Novell has 16 people working on this, and we do the JIT, we do the garbage collector. We tend to take on the tasks that are long-range tasks, right? So anything that we cannot depend on a contributor doing it on a weekend, right? The fun tasks. So we tend to either do the really boring stuff or the really hard stuff or the really long-haul stuff. So that's what the guys at Novell do. Mainsoft, which is a company that used to be in the business of porting Win32 applications to Unix, they now have a product to integrate J2EE and ASP.NET. So if you have a J2EE container, because the bank basically, the way the J2EE space is horrible, but basically a guy makes a decision to buy Sun 10,000, and you spend a couple $1 billion on that, and you have to run J2EE, and because that's what's mandated by central IT. And the question is that, well, it's fine that they use J2EE, but it's the most complicated framework ever designed by men. So I'm sorry, I shouldn't be saying that after we had that argument. But I figured since you said that in the morning, anyway. So J2EE is a piece of the what?
My slide says Java SE.
Oh, okay. So you also oppose J2EE. We're friends. So J2EE, I think that J2EE descended upon us because God was punishing us for our sins. So as part of this thing, the situation is that there's still some people who want to use ASP.NET for writing apps. And what is interesting about Mainsoft is that they have this tool that lets you write your ASP.NET stuff and interrupt with anything that you can have access to J2E. They basically have a recompiler that turns .NET code into JVM bytecodes. So you write your ASP.NET page, you press a button, and it sends it to your billion-dollar Sun machine, and it runs inside J2E in the bank, right? So it's a very neat product. And most of the ASP.NET code, and they're finally taking ADO.NET from our hands, comes from Mainsoft. It's a company based in San something in Israel. 5 minutes left. And the reality is that the majority of the contributions comes from the outside. There's 400 people working on this thing, either students or companies or small shops that are using this for some purpose. So although we can set some of the agenda because we have full-time people, the reality is that like every other open source project, it kind of grows beyond our control, right? So people will go and do things that, for example, we consider useless, like the iPod Sharp stuff. When they were doing it, we thought it was a complete waste of time, and then turned out to be very useful. Anyways, does that answer the question?
No, why does Novell?
Oh, why does Novell do it? Two reasons. One, to help the migration from applications from Windows to Linux, right? And number two, to improve our developer stack. The same reason we started the Mono project in the first place. We had come from a very bad experience with Evolution, and we're much more productive using this than anything else on the Linux platform. Anything else, and it consumes less memory than anything else modulo C, or C++ that we're not going to use because we're fundamentalists. What was the next question? We have 5 minutes.
So even though Windows Forms is not totally there, ASP.NET applications in the 1.1 or even
Yes.
in the 2.0, they're pretty
Yeah,
good.
they are pretty good.
Sufficient good.
I was going to do a demo with, I don't think I have time. I was going to show you this stuff running in Visual Studio, writing stuff in Visual Studio, and running it in Linux. But like, let me show you ASP apps. Yes, Pet Shop Web. I'm going to run the command line web server, but yeah, most ASP.NET stuff works out of the box. Now, we don't have very good tools for it. Today, you kind of have to be a geek to use them. That's where Mainsoft really, that's where Mainsoft really comes into play because they have the Visual Studio integration and everything. So this is the Pet Shop running on Mono. The only difference between this Pet Shop, hold on, no. I just need to start MySQL because I don't run the SQL Server every day. So that was actually a MySQL error. If you actually read the trace, it's MySQL error. So the only, so I was saying, there it is. So I can go to Angelfish. So the only difference between this and the real Pet Shop is that we ported the database back into use MySQL instead of SQL Server. Next question, you have 20 seconds. Or how much I have? 2 minutes? All right.
Languages, what are they? What are your favorite platform?
Hold on. We have a lot of them. The main ones are C# and so this is the stuff that works today. The stuff that works today is C# 1.0, 2.0. We're going to start this work on C# 3.0 as soon as it matures a little bit more. We don't have resources to throw away, so working on C# 3.0 today, as the language is still changing, would be a waste of our time. Java works through IKVM, so you can use ECJ to compile your code, or any other Java compiler. You can run your bytecode inside Mono. Boo and Boo, which it's funny that nobody mentioned Boo here. It's a very popular Python-esque language. It's a mix between Python and Python with types. Very popular. It's actually integrated into Mono Develop, and you can do all kinds of interactive stuff there. I run Python, of course. Phalange, it's painted in yellow because we have a bug in our C# compiler that prevents us from compiling it today, but the binary actually runs on Mono. So the binary runs, we can't completely host it on Linux because we can't build it ourselves, so we can't hack on it. It's just one tiny little bug. We'll hope to get it resolved. We had an old Visual Basic compiler. It was a piece of crap. It was based on the old MCS compiler. It was long story short, we have a new one being written by this mysterious hacker called Rolf Jarn that applied to this Google Summer of Code. He has pretty much the compiler ready. It compiles most of it itself right now, and it does generics and my support today. What else? Another interesting thing, another company which is called ST Microelectronics actually has a GCC, has modified GCC. They modified it for Windows, but they still did it. They modified GCC to generate IL. So we will get at least see possibly others. And there's a lot of issues involved. They're very interesting stuff. We have our own PHP.NET compiler. As it turns out, we don't really need it anymore because this Phalanger stuff came out. And the Ruby.NET compiler, it's also on yellow because it's the same bug. Our C# compiler crashes if you have an IEnumerable of a class that is defined inside the class. So we're fixing that, and once that's done, it runs. The binary actually runs, and all of the tests run except for a function that you guys wrote that talks about drives that don't exist on Linux, and because you guys are running the executable directly. That's it. All right. The last one, and we're done. Oh, 3 more questions? Oh, 2. Okay.
What do you feel is the ultimate goal or place of managed code in?
What is the ultimate goal? The question is, what is the ultimate goal? What is the role of place of managed code in the desktop? I think that the beauty of this is that it's really the developer productivity. And the fact that we're not as bloated as people would think. I mean, the fact that really the price that you pay for Mono is so minimal, 2 more megabytes for your application. It really means that we can write a lot of stuff with less people. I'm going to give you an example. FSpot was built. The photo management was one guy with the help of the community. Banshee was one guy with the help of the community. The Beagle search engine is a heavy project. It had 2 guys plus the community, right? So it is very easy to start learning. I mean, C# is really a pleasure to. I mean, I think that it comes down to the fact that writing software in C# actually makes you feel alive instead of dealing with includes and templates and the C++ stuff. So it's really it's a very much enjoyable experience compared to anything else we have. And the last one.
What is the name of distribution you're running on your?
Oh, this is our company distribution. It's SUSE Linux, yes. All right.
Where's the name Mono come from?
What?
Name Mono. What is
It means monkey in Spanish. We have an obsession at Ximian with evolutionary psychology and evolution and Darwin. And so everything in the company has a theme about, well, we no longer exist, but what? Oh, yeah. Well, it's stuff that monkeys really enjoy eating. Thank you so much.